we're on record. But today, we have this thing called the internet, and um, especially for those of you who are young enough that you've never not lived in a world without internet, it's really easy to take the internet for granted and to just sort of believe the hype that everything that you see on the internet is just a bunch of bullshit and not to be taken seriously or considered or anything like that. And there's certainly a lot of that. I mean, that's how it is with human knowledge, and that again gets us back into Trivum method that there's clear signal. There's clear signal being sent from one source to one receiver, one transmitter to one receiver, and there's also a lot of white noise mixed in with that signal. And so you have to be able to refine the signal to really understand what's being relayed from transmitter to receiver. And the internet is an amazing source for knowledge, for understanding, for nearly anything. I mean, it's unbelievable when you really start researching on the internet for anything. I mean, there's just layers upon layers with it. There's, much more conventional takes on the subject. And then as you get into more refined searches and more of a knowledgeable filtering of the topic, to where you can just ignore what you've previously come across and get into more knowing your keywords, knowing a topic well enough to know exactly where you want to dig deeper on a subject by using people's names or dates or certain terminology that's used within that particularly specialist branch of knowledge, discipline, science, whatever it is. And you can just it's fractal, as I find reality itself is fractal, that the whole is contained within its with tiny reflections of the whole contained within the whole, and that the more that you magnify, the more that you really refine your process of observation and study, that you find these fractal representations of the whole within each tiny part of it, where you get into this this rather mind-blowing way of looking at information, where it's all quite cyclical, and there's a really intense process that goes on with learning. Anyways, this is my introductory lecture, so I'm gonna get a little less heavy with all of this. It's a vast subject, and I want to kind of stick with the basics for this, so I'll get back to what I was talking about, and forgive my infinite segue. Again, kind of just the way I think. So, I do want to stress, though, that for the grammar process, which is mostly what I'd like to focus on because it's the beginning phase, that you really have to be willing to not just deny others' authority, but to ask, what is your source? Whenever you see anything for anything that anyone's saying, and it's rude in an informal conversation to be like, well, what's your source for this information? You know, you're not going to make a lot of friends that way. But sometimes it's important, especially if somebody's really clearly expressing blind belief in something, to call that out and say, you know, what's your source for this? Do you have some experience? Did you read a book? You know, can you provide a link or something like that? Because you know, it's really easy, and you see it a lot on the internet where people just say things and expect everyone to just, you know, accept it at face value. And like I'm saying, you know, in friendly situations, sometimes you should do that, but a lot of times you should not. So what I was saying was that with information, with everything that you find anywhere on the internet, or on the television, or in a newspaper, or in a book, or anything, if there's a man in a white lab coat in front of you explaining to you his theory, you know, to take notes and understand the terminology they're using by taking notes of things you don't understand, and just by questioning what that information is, what the motivations are of it being conveyed to you in the way that it is. Just questioning. You know, all of us were raised in the television age where we just have this screen in front of us just spewing information all the time of varying degrees of validity, and we're very used to passively accepting information and passively accepting the authority of people who are represented as being valid authorities. And you know, it's an amazing thing to really learn something from someone who knows what they're talking about and can really break down information for you. So that's great, but even to get to that point where you know that someone is actually an authority on what they're talking about, you have to take apart what they're saying and go research it yourself. And so this is my point, is that is the first step for this with grammar, is that all these things I'm saying in my curriculum, that's why I provide tons of links in my curriculum, not to confuse or overwhelm you, but because I don't want you to take my word for anything that I say ever. I mean, you know, my own experience is my own experience, and at some point you have to consider my motivation and my character and what you know about my history to evaluate me and as a source of information. But at the same time, you know, I want, and it's this class isn't going to do you any good if you aren't willing to research. That is the basis for this, is to not accept me as an authority or any of the other people that I cite in my curriculum as authorities, but to research yourself and for you to be the authority, to where you know these subjects and you understand them and are conversant within them, and you can break it down for me as well as I can break it down for you. And I mean, it's a process like all of life, and that's what's up with that. That's how it's got to be. And if you're not willing to take that active engagement with your learning, then this class is going to be, you know, it could be a catalyst for later development. But if you're not willing to do that now, if you can't make the time for that, if you can't wrap your head around that, then this class is not going to be as good for you as it will for people who are. And I certainly hope that the majority of you will take this to heart and understand that this is what this is a way of thinking, but it's not just a way of thinking. It's kind of a way of life, you know, to wonder at what truth is, what reality is, what actually exists in this world, what doesn't exist, what is fantasy, and what does fantasy mean? Where does imagination, where does intuition, where does all of that fit into your picture, and how much of what you think is true can you provide evidence for? You know? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So I always keep that in mind when I'm making claims, to consider what I can actually show evidence for within a situation. And that's a really handy way to think in a lot of ways. So I'm getting there. By there, I mean about touching on all these things that I wanted to touch on for this. I kind of wanted to sum up with this and a few other things I have in my notes. That blind belief is an impediment to not just knowledge but further exploration. If we blindly accept something as true without looking at it from many angles, without breaking not just what we know, but how we know it down to its component parts, and examining them all closely, then we limit our own perspective and the possibilities of our own growth. This is what we use the Trivum method to do, but in order to do it, we need to apply the same process to the Trivum method to understand it and to understand its strengths and weaknesses. And this is what this class is about, you know. Again, it's kind of a fractal process where you are taking the Trivum method apart and learning how to use it. But in order to do that, you kind of need to take the Trivum method and apply it to a particular subject. And that's why in the curriculum I have all the notes, I'm sorry, not notes, but I have all the quotes and the historical reference in the beginning, in the introduction, to what disinformation is, to why we need to think clearly and evaluate information clearly, because everyone in this world is not on your side. There are many people who want to harm you, to enslave you, to make you do their bidding. And that's what those quotes are for. And so you really have to put this within a historical framework to be able to understand what it is I'm saying. You can apply it to absolutely anything, though. You can take any event or incident from history and take it apart and really start to get more perspectives on it, you know, to really understand, you know, like if you're talking about a war, you know, to not just understand it in the terms of how like an American understands a war via their media and what their government tells them about it, you know, but really understand it from the opposing side, what it means to them, why it happened from their end, what their politicians are telling their people, what their media is saying to their own population, and that whole interplay, you know, and then the whole rest of the international community, what other countries are saying about this, and I mean, you can do this with any event within written history, just about, because you'd be surprised what you'll find when you dig on the internet. There's amazing sources for all kinds of information that's far from common knowledge on the internet. It's really amazing. I love it. And I'm really happy to be teaching this class, and I really appreciate all of you taking an interest in it. And I thank you very much for your time, and wish you all the best. See you soon.